All right, we'll give everybody a moment here before we get started. Looks like a few folks are joining yet. All right, I have 6:31 on my watch. This is a call to order the Plan Commission for the Village of Cottage Grove. It is Wednesday, June 10th. We are holding this as a Zoom meeting due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Zoom is being recorded. All the chats and audio as well as video are being recorded to capture all of this. The public certainly can join. There is a link on the agenda for either doing it via smartphone or tablet or computer, or there's always the old-fashioned way of audio. We'll start with roll call. Lisa?
Whitmire. Broom. Justison.
Here.
Ratcliffe.
Ratcliffe here.
Lyle. Schultz. Williams.
Here. Looks like Don's joining right now. It looks like. I'm gonna call on him again.
Yep. Don, roll call. Are you here?
I just got on.
Thank you.
All right, super. All right, as I said, this Zoom meeting due to the COVID pandemic. We've got a roll call already called, and we have a quorum, and the agenda was properly posted. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So find a flag if you want. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 4 is public appearances, public's opportunity to speak on any subject, either on the agenda or otherwise. Again, because we're running a Zoom, that might be easier to have the public comment at this point. We ask the public to provide their name, their address, so we can capture that, and certainly what they'd like to discuss or share, and to hold that to approximately 3 minutes, just in case we have others that would like to speak. So with that, I'll pause, and I'll wait for anyone who would like to jump in.
Just Paul, I just want to have a quick question here. I'm from Great Wolf Partners. There's the item here talking about the hotel coming up. Do you want us to hold our comments until that is discussed, or do you want us to talk now?
Paul, since you already have unmuted, feel free to share your thoughts, please.
All right, we'll go now then. Thank you. So I just wanted to say I'm Paul Wagner, General Counsel for Great Wolf Partners. We have an office located in Cottage Grove, and I have additional business interests that I'll speak to shortly about that, where we operate in the village. We want to thank the village for this opportunity to speak to you and voice some concerns that we have, about this hotel project, and raise questions for the Commission's consideration tonight. So some of our concerns couldn't be raised until now because the information, for example, the building elevations and materials being used for that hotel weren't available to us until this week. But to begin here, we're disappointed that to see that an area that the village is calling in its planning staff report, which we just reviewed, gateway into the village, would allow this hotel to use for all practical purposes a 100% EIFS as its exterior material. The hotel is being touted as an upscale hotel, or one that caters, to a different market segment that is willing to pay higher rates, and yet the materials being used are inferior to those that are required on the southeast quadrant to this site by Summit Credit Union and part of the Commerce Park. And this is a highly visible building that we feel should reflect and portray the image the village wants to have at this key location, which should at a minimum, in our mind, consist of upgraded architectural characteristics and materials as part of its design. As an example, there ought to be more glass on the south elevation facing the interstate as a potential. And as part of a PUD, this also bothers us that as part of a PUD request, we believe that there would be a minimum requirement from the village for this project to provide these types of upgraded characteristics and architectural characteristics. Gray Wolf has, as I mentioned above, business interests in the village. We're developing a 127-acre Class A business park across the street from this site on Highway TT, and we're going to be using materials that will reflect similar or greater requirements to that of the Commerce Park. So it's disappointing to see that the developments around this park, which will be seen daily by all those on I-94, all those going on Highway TT and Highway N, is being held to a lesser standard, and one that we think is contrary towards establishing the positive image the village desires and is striving for. The next point is, secondly, I just want to say we're concerned that aspects of the planning staff report upon which this is being based and decisions are being made are outdated and should not be relied upon as evidence that supports this project. In particular, on pages 2 and 3 of that report, it states that there were studies conducted of both the business community and a residential survey that supported a hotel in the community. And we don't see any reference to more than one hotel being noted in that study. Moreover, we don't see where a study has been provided that supports the demand for additional hotels of this size being contemplated tonight within the community. A demand that they're saying is for an additional 97 rooms. Nor do we see any studies since the village approved the Comfort Suites only recently, and which the village knows is fully funded and ready to move forward. We don't see studies which this report references, or that talk about the need and the demand for more than one hotel. And quite frankly, the studies which this report references were rendered obsolete once the Comfort Suites was approved. There will be a hotel for Cottage Grove with meeting and event space. There will be a hotel for the residents of Cottage Grove, which is what the study is referencing here. There is no survey or information from the business community nor the general public about whether or not they feel now that our hotel, the Comfort Suites, has been approved, is that more than one hotel is needed to meet the demand for either meeting space or event space, or just if the residents are even mildly interested in having more than one hotel in the community. So what we're asking and we're trying to understand is, why is the village positioning itself to make a decision tonight and or on Monday based on insufficient and obsolete information? And then finally, the last point we want to make here is that it's surprising to us to see the village moving forward with this project when all along the information being provided to us has been that, and to the village for that matter, has been that this hotel would not be a direct competitor of the Comfort Suites. And yet, given the size of the proposed hotel at 97 rooms, the fact that they said previously in a meeting in front of the village that they would be willing to drop their rates to whatever it took to fill their building, and even the Atwell's website, which says that this is IHG's answer to the all suites hotels, which is exactly what the Comfort Suites Hotel is, that they have shown that they intend to be a direct competitor, and it makes no sense to move forward until the demand shows the community can support an additional hotel. It's disappointing that we're actually at this point right now with the village and in this process without real answers to any of these questions, and that the village is simply moving forward for whatever reasons, I don't understand why, without the information it should have in order to make an informed decision. And we're asking that the village to at least consider these concerns and questions in its decision-making process tonight. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Paul. Others from the public? Sorry, I was muted. All right. Then we'll move on to item 5, is discuss and consider the meeting minutes from the Plan Commission on May 13th Any comments from the commission?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, we have a first from Melissa. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Alex. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right, item 6 is discuss and consider request from the Houston Hotel Group, LLC, for approval for a precise implementation plan for an Atwell Suite Hotel at 4672 County Highway TT. Aaron, you had a memo in the packet for everyone. Walk through that.
I do. The applicants are here if they would like to speak about the project first.
Okay, that sounds great. Troy or Houston's? You might be on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm traveling and I'm in a hotel myself and I've got some low bandwidth here. So I've got you in my earbuds so I can hear you and I'm using the audio on my computer. With me is Scott England, who is our architect, and we have others from our group as a part to this. I'd just like to respond to the earlier comments. I mean, this isn't the first hotel I've done where a competitor doesn't want to see us come to town, and in the 8th hour springs with concerns that are not concerns. I'll let the architect address the first concern about building materials. Scott, if you want to address that, this building is not 100% EPIS. That's just not true.
That is correct. We are working with some brand standards. So there is a portion of the building that is EPIS, but the main facade that you'll be seeing from I-94 is a sandwich metal panel, the higher quality metal panel. And there's a 2-story portion of the facade that's wrapping around the main corner of the building that is all curtain wall glass that lets you into the main lobby area and a second floor lounge and meeting space area. So the building, the portion of the building seen from the interstate is all a sandwich metal panel or clear story glass.
I think a second comment I would like to make is that the very first meeting I attended, I spoke to the market study that we had conducted, which was done by HVS, who's recognized as one of the top market research firms, not only in the United States, but in the world. And we're relying on that study in a free market to launch this venture and build this hotel. If the idea is being put forward that nothing in Cottage Grove can be built until there's a study to support it, you can hire any number of market study firms to tell you whatever you want to hear. HVS is a legitimate firm that if the demand wasn't there, would not have produced a study to suggest what we're proposing, and we certainly wouldn't be taking a multi-million-dollar risk just to tell our friends and neighbors that we are partners in a hotel. Lastly, I would just say that this is still America, this is still a democracy, and this is still a free market. If we choose to risk $18 million and develop a hotel, as long as we're meeting the standards of the community and the city, I think it's our right to do that and not have a competitor come in who clearly doesn't want another hotel and try to sabotage our efforts in a final meeting. We've taken great pains and great effort to bring a Class A project to the community with people who are pillars in this community who, in fact, to the building material standard, we could do all EPIS on this project, but to their credit, they said that they wanted an elevated look and they wanted an elevated project because it represented their family and their interests in this community. So we've done everything that we said we would do and more to make sure that this is a project and a product that will represent this community well. And I think it's a little disingenuous to claim that this is anything but, a competitor not wanting to see another hotel come in.
Well,
Okay.
listen, this is Joe Wagner from Great Wolf. I'm just going to put out there and say, a competitor, that was told, and we've been, we responded to the village who was looking for a hotel for many, many years. And we stepped up to the plate and went through the process. I'm sure much like you and came up. Our study showed that we needed about 95 rooms. So first of all, if you got a study that says we need 170, I'll pay to see it. So that'd be great. So that it's not disingenuous as far as we're investing with the village. We did go through the TIF process, and we asked the village to partner with us because the reason we asked for TIF dollars was because of a demand shortage, right? We showed that it was going to take some extra effort to hit the occupancy numbers to get an acceptable return, okay? And if you have evidence and numbers and you can show us that 170 rooms in Cottage Grove is gonna hit those numbers, I'm all for it. I've just known that the entire time I've lived here, and I live right on the Oaks Golf Course, right around the corner. We've been waiting for a hotel to come to Cottage Grove, and we stepped up and did it. And at the nth hour, you guys came along with another 97 rooms. So, and I did send a letter the minute I heard that there was a project going on. I believe it was sent to the entire board and the planning commission. And it's not to pick on your development, or I'm not ripping on your development. I don't see any reason why.
You're not ripping on my development? That's an interesting statement.
I don't see any reason why we would want, why would we would have, we've gone all these years and we've proven, we were begging for a developer to come in, and all of a sudden we have the need for 172 rooms? That's my question. And the question is if it's justified. No one can stop anyone from building a building, and I'm not telling you can't. Obviously not. That's the village has the right to decide whether or not they want to use public funds to have a second hotel, and the village has the right. They have the zoning requirements, etc. And all we're saying is how is the decision being made? That's all we're asking. And if the decision's made to move forward and everyone goes for it, you guys build what you build, we build what we build. That's the way it is. I'm all for competition. I guess that's the way it is. But I would tell you that the studies that we've had have never showed. And like I said, if you've got something different, I'd love to see it.
All right. Thanks, Joe. I think the public comments is over. That's why I asked at the front end of this, but I appreciate the feedback. I'm sure Troy does as well. Troy, I don't know if you want to comment on that. I'll give you the floor, and then we'll move on to Aaron with his memo.
Well, I just think the idea that, we have to sort of prove some burden is just, again, very disingenuous. And if that's the case, then anybody who might want to come to town and open up a Pizza Hut can't do it if there's a pizza place that exists. Anybody who would want to open a C-store shouldn't be allowed to do that because there's already a Quick Trip. I mean, that logic doesn't make any sense. And as far as our study, again, our study was completed by the top research firm in the world. We're not just looking at Cottage Grove. We're looking at the east side of Madison and Cottage Grove, and those numbers support what we're doing.
All right. Thank you, Troy. Let's move on to Aaron then with the memo. And we'll outline those items. Aaron, you might be on mute.
About that. Yep. You have the memo in your packet. We recommend approval with set of conditions. One, just clarifying that this applies to the hotel site as it's described in the legal description in the submittal. The remaining property remains under the RH rural holding until more specific plan comes in for that. Any alterations to the existing lot lines are going to require a future approval with a certified survey map or plat. Just clarifying that any signage requires sign permits prior to installation. And just noting that there was a white oak shown on the landscaping plan at the southeast corner of the building. Given the height that those could achieve, I'm just wondering if that's going to block what would be a fairly prominent corner of the building. So they may want to consider moving that.
Okay, comments from engineering. Anything there, Kevin?
Yeah, I think similar to Aaron's, more just conditions and specifics as it moves forward. A lot of these, I guess, they kind of overlap a little bit with Aaron said as to kind of how it's going to be broke out in the future as far as proposed lot lines, and just trying to figure out where setbacks are for light trespass and some of the parking and different things on there. Otherwise, there'll have to be some more specifics on stormwater provided. They're planning underground detention, which works. They just didn't, at least with the information that I had seen anyway, they didn't have any specifics on it, so they'll have to provide that. I think I was just verifying, and this can be more of a truck turning movement, just that where they've got the trash enclosure, assuming that it's access with gates and stuff, if those are open, can a vehicle get in and out and turn around or something like that in those areas, the way it's shown on there right now. I think the rest is basically stormwater and just kind of, like I said, some of the, regarding the setbacks as far as with how the lots will be laid out in the future and everything through there. So, and I think our letter got in there late, so I don't know if it's in everybody's packets, or I think Lisa had sent it out anyway. I don't remember when, exact day or anything, but well, hopefully everybody's got it as well.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Any questions from the commission?
Hey, John, I got a question, I guess, for Aaron.
Okay.
Aaron, maybe you could talk about this. So I guess the siding in the building kind of came up in question in some of the architectural pieces, and I read through your statements, and you talked about EFS. So I think some of the things we're referring to is, that stone architecture, or, that stone look up a certain level. I know my house has it. It's not the full first story, but, there's a level of it to the windows, and then it goes higher. Is that, is the siding, is the structure, consistent with what we're looking at? You had a scorecard. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that and how that affects this project. And you should unmute yourself when you talk to
Get the hang of this by the time we're done doing it.
It's only 2.5 months.
Yeah, so the EFS material is acceptable. Grey Wolf is correct that the village could have the option of requiring higher levels of design as part of a land unit development. But in this case, I think the architecture works. As they say, they do have the more prominent corner facing the interstate. There are some other materials. So I guess from a staff point of view, I think what they're showing is fine. These are not subject to the same covenants that the Commerce Park is, which would.
Yeah. What is the points schedule then for that landscaping in your memo? You talk about points. Can you just refresh me on your scorecard? You don't have to go through the great details of how each point comes up, but how does that all work again?
Within the landscaping plan, there's different areas in a site that require landscaping, building foundations, parking lots, street frontage, things like that. Based on the zoning district you're in, you're required to have so many points per 100 feet of building foundation, or so many points per square foot of parking lot, that kind of thing. What I pointed out in the staff report, they're well above and beyond the amount that is required.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions from commission members? I guess I have one for Troy. I mean, are you still on the timeline you told the commission and the board just a short time ago, a month ago, with everything that's going on? And unfortunately, has that changed? Are you still marching to that original timeline? Troy, right now we don't hear you, so I don't know if your connection was lost or what.
Yep, you got me now?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I just said, and I'll say it again. The banks that we are working with are relationships that have been involved with our partnership for quite some time, and they have expressed the willingness to stand by us and see this project through. So depending upon bids and the process we're going through with the RFP with different contractors, we're still looking at a late summer, early fall groundbreaking.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for the developer or for staff from the commission?
Yes, John, I have a question for you. This really gets around process, right? So we're looking for, item number 6, discuss and consider the request is our role, and this will go to village board, and then they have, if the village is going to contribute financing, if the village is going to be some sort of stakeholder in that fashion, roads, whatnot, that's going to be the board's concern at that end. Is that really the process we're looking at here, right?
Correct.
Okay.
It takes the recommendation of this commission, and then obviously any TID incentive would have to go through the board as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
John, I'll make a motion to approve the request from Houston Hotel Group LLC for approval of a precise implementation plan for an Atwell Suites Hotel at 4672 County Highway TT with staff conditions in the planning staff report and MSA report.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second then. Any further discussion from the commission? Having heard none then, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Item 7 then is discuss and consider request from Ferris Auto for a site plan amendment for a property at 212 West Cottage Grove Road. Aaron, I think you have another memo in the packet for us.
Yes, not sure if the applicant is here or not. I corresponded with one of the brothers this morning, and there was a kind of emergency in the family that may cause them to not be here tonight. That was completely understandable the way he explained it. But as you'll recall, we approved a conditional use permit for them to operate, under certain conditions that were approved for that project. What they're coming in with now is a slightly higher level of detail for the site plan. I think one change from the concepts we looked at the conditional use permit process is they changed the orientation of the proposed new sales building. Have been oriented kind of east-west along the north edge of the parking lot. They've kind of rotated that 90 degrees, so it's more along the west edge of the lot. But we would recommend approval of the site plan with a series of conditions. One, again, just a reminder, they'll have to obtain site permit for any new or revised signage prior to installation. Once again, reconfirming the fence is a 6-foot privacy fence, matching the examples they provided at the conditional use process. The fence shall completely enclose all sides of the parking area where the enclosure is not provided by buildings. In the previous concept, it looked like the new sales building would provide a portion of that boundary around the parking lot. That may not be the case, or it would be less the case than it was before, so they might have to have more fencing along that north side. We'll want to see a final landscaping plan. They are planning on a small infiltration pond to the south of the new parking area. We'll just want MSA to sign off on all the details of that, along with erosion control and grading. Just confirming the materials on the new building are as described in the email provided by the applicant with the brick base we'd like to see on the north and east side of the building, and trim around the windows and doors, which I'm sure is intended but wasn't shown on the drawing. And then we'll want to see the parking lot layout as well before they go ahead and stripe it.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Kevin, any comments from MSA?
Nothing drastic. We didn't have like a memo. Aaron just asked me about what they had on there, but basically agree with Aaron's comments as long as we can look at the stormwater, because right now the outlet to that storm pond would probably go in the rear yard of those residential lots to an inlet and then back up to county DB. So we just want to make sure that it's not going to cause a concern to the residents, and obviously start getting calls from the village when a pond starts going in that's going to have an outlet that heads to their backyards back there.
Do we need to have that information completed before we can move to any type of approvals?
Alex, I think as Aaron said, it would be part of the conditions that we set forth, and just
they would have to have that signed off on before they can get a building permit to do anything.
Yeah.
Okay. Just all right. As long as there's a check step in between us and the next step, right? We approve something, and then, because I was going to ask about that too. The pond, how does that affect the neighbors? And if we don't know yet, what are we approving? But if it's in the stipulations there, okay.
Yeah. Kevin, is there any way to tie into that inlet so it's not on the surface? In other words, going right from the pond to that outlet, so if we had, heaven forbid, a lot of rain, it would be going down that inlet right away.
I'll have to look at the information they have, but there might be a way to connect a drain tile to that outlet, or to that, they can maybe possibly put a drain tile into that outlet structure. Obviously, like you said, the heavy rains, there's definitely going to have to be an overflow route that'll go through their backyards, but a lot of it drains that direction now. It's just going to be more, as a concentrated outlet and stuff like that. So we just want to make sure the amount of water that's going there and that it doesn't cause any, anything different than what it is now, basically. So.
Yeah, because now there's really nothing. It's just, however, the land is sloped and
correct.
It's going wherever it needs to go. So anything is going to be improvement. I would want to see that, any approval would make sure it's way better than it is currently. And if we have that as a condition for them, just to make sure it's done right.
Yep.
Other questions from commission members for either Aaron or Kevin?
Yeah, I had one. Was this always supposed to go here? I guess I can't remember a few months ago. were they planning on having this new building there?
Yeah, that was always part of the concept, was to take out the two older sheds that were there that used to be part of the mower repair business a few years back. They were always planning to take those out and replace it with the sales building. The only change is the orientation of it relative to the parking lot.
So once this new building is in, then the two sheds would be destroyed?
Yeah, they'll have to come out first, I would imagine.
Okay.
And that'll be an improvement right there, because they're definitely dilapidated.
I'm not really crazy about the shed roof on the new building. I'd almost like to see a gable roof, the more traditional peaked in the middle. I just don't think it makes the building look that well the way they show it right now.
Aaron, comments or?
Yeah, I guess that may give it more of a residential feel. I don't know if that would be out of place on a commercial street, but it could be a condition if that's how the plan commission feels about it.
Is the other larger building, what does that roof look like? Trying to pull it up.
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up on Google Street View here.
It's a traditional metal building with a gable in the middle, if I recall correctly.
Yeah,
I believe that's what it is.
very shallow peak.
Yeah, the pitch is not great on it, I don't think.
I kind of feel like it should look like that one a little bit for consistency of the property.
Yeah, the new building is much narrower, so I guess in a way this kind of matches the slope of that building. It's just only sloping in one direction.
Aaron,
Okay.
from your expertise, I mean, would it look better if it had more of a traditional look, similar to the building, or?
And again, I guess it kind of depends what you're looking for. To me, I think the gable type roof, especially with the asphalt shingles and everything, would just read as more residential. So I guess I don't mind the roof the way they have it.
They don't have to have shingles. I mean, it still could be a metal roof, but just a gable metal roof.
I mean, what is the cost impact for the developer?
Metal roof would be more.
Well, I know that. No, I'm saying metal roof is, yeah, that definitely. But I'm saying, gable versus just a slanted roof. I mean, is it significant? I don't know what those.
I wouldn't see it as a significant cost increase or decrease.
Probably a pre-made truss type thing either way.
Yep.
That's what I was thinking, but I wanted to ask the question. It's trusses either way.
Okay.
And maybe they have a reason to do it that way. I don't know. It's unfortunate they're not here to kind of weigh in on that. Does the commission feel strongly either way?
I just don't like the way the building looks as it's shown.
I agree. It's hard to picture it in that spot, I guess, for me, what it would look like. Do we know what colors they're proposing it be?
No, but can probably wrote the condition.
Are they on the? Are they here? I guess one of the questions I have is like, now that it's turned sideways, like if it was facing the front, all you would see is the front, and then it pitches towards the back. Now that it's sideways, you see the single slant. I mean, if we go back to them, Aaron, and say, hey, is it in their budget? Is it even possible for this? This is an option. Does that hold up their project? Does it? How does it affect them? Do we have a moment do we have a month to pause and go back and say, hey, is this an option for you guys? Or is this, no, they really need to get this done, funds run out or something like that. I don't want to hold up, any of their work that they've been doing. I think they've been working with us. They've been, approachable, and they came to us and asked for help. We've been doing everything. But I see the sort of the conflict. Originally the building was one direction, then it got turned. And so now it kind of changes the look and feel of our main street, right? I mean, that's a main thoroughfare, high visibility structure that's going to stand, test of time for a while. Do we have time to do a little pause here?
We'll also have to go to the village board next week. You could approve it with the roof design that you prefer, and we'd have some time to go back to the applicants, and if they have a strong objection, they can bring it up with the board.
I mean, it's only really 2 days, right? You're going to tell them tomorrow. They're going to have to get with their engineering group or whoever, the name's on the drawing here, but yeah.
I don't see it as a big, significant cost issue.
Aaron, this is phase 2, isn't it? I mean, the building itself, they're going to do the enclosure first, and then they're going to knock down those sheds, and then do the sales building, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like they kind of combined it all into one project.
Oh, well,
I'm not sure if they could afford to do the building this year or not, but they plan to do it now.
Well, even better, because it does need to be addressed. So,
my sense is they're anxious to get started, and they'd probably, the risk of speaking for them, they'd probably be more open to changing the roof than waiting a month.
So how do we do this? I mean, do you do a condition that you approve they change the roof, but then we also don't know what that roof change looks like, and so we're sort of rubber stamping something we don't see. I mean, we really can't comment on the budget because we don't see the budget in front of us, so I don't know if that's necessarily fair to judge on that. I mean, what's the process here, Aaron or John?
I mean, we can probably get their input by Monday, and then the board can chew on that, whether they feel strongly either way. It sounds like the commission is leaning towards a gabled roof now that the building's turned 90 degrees. If we want to approve that with that condition, that's fine. And then, again, this has got to go to the board, and they can chew on that as well, and any feedback that the developer has.
I guess the only other thought I have is, what is our role here? And if this structure is compliant with our ordinances and our standards, then, to me, then I guess my obligation is to approve it as presented with a recommendation of the board that consider a gabled roof. Like, I mean, that's us putting our wish lists on a project that is compliant, right? I mean, is this compliant, Aaron?
Yes.
Okay.
But
I wouldn't feel comfortable mandating a stipulation of a roof that we don't necessarily have in our ordinances. That like I have nothing to go back on and say this is why I said that was compliant, other than it looks funny to me. Like, I'm not an architect, so I'm not gonna.
I think we do that all the time. We tell people we want masonry. We tell them different building materials that we prefer or don't prefer. So this is no different than that. That's part of what I think the Planning Commission does.
Yeah, and I think we do that in our the comprehensive plan. And if this is compliant, I think it might be a question for the lawyer, because it's some of the stuff Larry talked to us about, conditional permits and all this other stuff, right? I mean, I think the board should talk about it. I mean, I just don't want to hold up the project. I mean, if it meets spec, and then it goes up to the board, and then the board says that,
You can put it in as a recommendation as opposed to a condition.
Right.
I'm ready to make a motion.
All right, Don?
I'd make a motion to recommend approval of the site plan amendment for the property at 212 West Cottage Grove Road for the Ferris Auto with the conditions set forth in Aaron's letter from June 5th, 2020. And conditions of any drainage issues that were discussed with MSA, as well as changing the condition of changing the roof from a shed roof to a gable roof.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion second for approval with those conditions. Any further discussion?
Yes, I want clarification. So you are making it a condition to approve?
Affirmative. Yes.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All right, having heard none, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed?
Yes, me.
Anybody abstain?
Aye, Alex.
Motion passes. I think that's a majority. I don't know. It is. So motion carries. Item 8 is to discuss and consider a request from the town of Sun Prairie to engage in a boundary agreement discussions. There is a letter from Updike in our packets in regards to this. And it was sent to myself, and it's distributed to the board as well. So it starts here and then goes to the board as whether or not there is interest in engaging the town of Sun Prairie in a boundary agreement. So I'll open up the floor for commission members.
So we explored this quite extensively, and Aaron, I believe you were part of this. You put a lot of work in. We work well with the town of Sun Prairie, and as typically what happens is there was a funding issue that came up, and I believe it may have been for the final agreement. I guess we have to go back to the minutes, but we went through and we went back and forth on what they were interested in looking for and what our interests were. So we've done a lot of this, and we would probably obviously review it again, but a lot of the work has been done on the agreement they're looking for. I think their other concern is that last map I saw of Madison, it looks like they're getting a little greedier than they were the time before. They keep pushing a little further east than what they, initially had said they were going to. So I think the town of Sun Prairie is also looking for some protection from Madison, because which would happen if we have an agreement in place.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
He's here. One, as you said, we have kind of gone down this process a little bit, and we have that work we can pull back up. Two, we're also currently working on a similar agreement with the City of Madison and Town of Cottage Grove. We're a little bit further ahead on that one than we are on this one, obviously. But some of the experience and things we're gathering from that other effort can most likely go into this one as well. And also the last time we did this, I was a consultant for the village, and now I'm on the staff, so you're not really paying me anything above and beyond my salary at this point to work on it, as opposed to before. I do want to point out Chairman Updike is here as well, so to give him an opportunity to speak if he would like to.
I think most of the points that were raised in my letter, I think the key point is not looking to wrap up a final, very detailed plan, but they can open the lines of communication to try to get a general sense of what issues we'd be facing. For example, the town of Sun Prairie totally controls Faber Road, which is on the northern edge of the village. I'm sure that the village is going to be looking at developing that parcel in the intermediate future. Where do we want to go with something like that? So we don't have to look at the real details of the issues, but as Aaron mentioned, a lot of the statements of principle have been outlined, and I think it's just a matter of documenting that we've got lines of communication open as issues come up, we can address them in more detail when they become extant.
Okay, thanks, Lyle. Appreciate that. Open it up to the commission members.
I'm fine with working with the town of Sun Prairie and exploring. We can bring up what we worked on in the past, as a review to show everyone else that wasn't part of that what we had discussed and just to kind of give them a background.
Okay, thanks, Don.
I'm in favor of it as well.
All right. Alex or Melissa, anything to chime in?
Just I guess staffing wise, John. I mean, what is the team's working on? These are complex agreements sometimes, and do we have time to execute it? And I guess that's going to be for the board if this moves on to discuss timelines, right? I mean, how long does this take, the execution of it, and those fun things. And I guess does that come back to Plan Commission, right? So I guess once an agreement is made between the two organizations, right? They've met and everyone's happy. Does it then come back to planning and then again back to the board for final approval?
I think you would probably see this a few times before it becomes final.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am concerned about how long it would take, just as far as staff time and resources. But otherwise, I'm not opposed to seeing if something can be worked out.
Okay. And from my vantage point, I think as these things tend to get spaced out through meetings and other things, they don't hit staff, all at once. So, and the other nice thing is that we do have some history already in place to leverage from. So that's like we're not starting from scratch from that vantage point. And who knows? We may ask for something. The town of Sun Prairie may ask for something completely different, and we may not be able to come to agreement right away. I don't think that's the case. I think because we already have some of this already aligned, we can begin the process of at least starting that communication and at least send this to the board for consideration.
So what kind of motion are you looking for here, John? To approve staff working on this, or like?
It's essentially to approve the potential discussion of a boundary agreement. I think is at the outset, and then this would go to the board on Monday to have their consideration. Aaron, is that kind of how that would work?
Is this something we want to start working on? Or?
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess I'll make a motion then to approve the request from the town of Sun Prairie to engage in the boundary agreement discussions.
All right.
With Cottage Grove, yeah.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and second then. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries.
Can I just say one thing? Heidi, Trustee Murphy had sent an email in earlier today to you and I about this agenda item, and I see she's on the meeting. I don't know if she wants to talk.
Oh, I'm sorry. Heidi, we jumped the gun maybe on your, I didn't see your note. So please feel free to take the floor.
No, I wanted to support the discussion. So I can talk about it more on village board, that I think we can find things that will be mutually beneficial, such as planning, water quality, water management issues. So I just wanted to encourage the Plan Commission to approve, which they did. So thanks.
All right. Thanks, Heidi. Then we move on to discuss and consider a public hearing draft of the comprehensive plan. Aaron, you want to touch on this?
Yeah, so most of this I think we've seen before in various stages at past meetings. There's two elements to it. One, the extension of the Wyden-Olson neighborhood. There's a map in the packet that would become the map that goes into the comp plan. It's generally similar to the one Jim Olson has presented earlier. The only difference is he's requesting to add a little bit of single family on Vilas Road. And what I've talked with him about is, we prefer to have that accessed off the side road and not directly off Vilas. And then on the western edge, he's looking to have some wooded lots in an area that had been shown as a nature preserve area. And I just kind of explained if we allowed that, it would probably be just the footprint that gets cleared, maximize the amount of woods that are retained. And the other part of this is the 3 Homburg parcels located north of the Stop and Go. We saw the presentation from Moving Out at the last meeting with their concept. This is not necessarily directly tied to that project, but this change would allow a project like that to happen. Basically introducing the multifamily component on those parcels. And the map that goes along with that is more just a location diagram than a site plan.
All right, any questions for Aaron?
I guess I should point out, this isn't a final approval. You're approving the draft that we would consider for approval after a public hearing.
Comments from commission members then? Questions? So essentially, Aaron, this is just the approval for having a public hearing about a couple adjustments to the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, we have to send copies of the changes to various entities that are identified by state statute. We have to publish a notice, and this is just confirming that this is the draft you want us to base those notices on.
I like that the planned neighborhood number 6 makes accommodations for the Glacial Drumlin Trail to go through, and for the planned mixed use area number 3, I think it's important that we open up the options for that area since it has sat empty for so long. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve the public hearing draft of the comprehensive plan.
Second that.
All right, motion second then. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Item 10 then is discuss and consider a public participation plan setting a public hearing date for the proposed amendments to the comprehensive plan.
So one of the parts of approving a comp plan is having written public participation document. There's kind of a minimum you have to do, which is the notices that I mentioned earlier. Notice that goes into the newspaper 30 days prior to the hearing. Written notification to the entities identified by state statute, and holding that public hearing. You'll remember with the more extensive amendment we did last time around, we also did surveys and an open house and things like that. because there's more of a general change to the plan overall, whereas these are really more specific to the two particular areas. I think it's also worth noting that on the Hamburg parcels, as moving out moves forward, they will also be required to have a neighborhood meeting as part of that process, which I believe they are looking to do later this month or possibly early in July, which would be prior to the comp plan public hearing. So that would, in a sense, act as another form of public participation.
Any questions from commission members?
I'll make a motion to approve the public participation plan and setting the public hearing date for the proposed amendments to the comprehensive plan, as noted in the staff report.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Motion. Thank you. Motion and second. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Item 11 is discuss potential subdivision ordinance amendment to extend the deadline for recording a certified survey map. Aaron, you're on a roll.
These are getting progressively shorter, less to talk about. So this came up because the Hamburgs had a CSM in Coyle South that was approved last April, which they never got around to recording, kind of moved their attention onto West Lawn, I guess. And we had to have the board reapprove that CSM at their last meeting because it passed both the state's deadline and the deadline that's in our ordinance. And in the process of kind of checking those deadlines, the state's deadline for recording a CSM is 12 months. In our subdivision ordinance, it's only 30 days from the village board approval, which seems unnecessarily strict. So the recommendation would be to just change the ordinance to match the state statute. This would be for feedback at this point because we'd have to have a public hearing for this before we actually make the change.
Larry or Rick, just comment on kind of the legal ease of this for the commission, please. I mean, it seems logical, but it'd be good to hear from both one of you. Whoever hits unmute first.
And I know that Larry is having some technical issues, so I don't know if he's going to be able to hop off mute, but we do see Rick on there.
Rick, if you're talking, we can't hear you. Oh, Larry, we can hear.
I'm trying. This is Larry. Okay, I was finally unmuted. I agree with Aaron. He and I had a chance to talk about this, and there may even be a couple of things we'll look at in this ordinance while we're digging in on it that might even be tweaked. It makes a lot of sense for there to be one requirement. There's no real downside for the village either.
Right. I just wanted to make sure that my brain was thinking logically, and that. So thank you, Larry. Any questions from commission members?
I have one. Why did the village have it at 30 days? Like, is there any reason that we know of?
I don't know.
Just one of those things? Okay.
It never really came up as an issue until now.
The historian is retired.
Right, yes.
It may have been something we boilerplated off of another group of codification things, so we just inherited it and never had an issue because most of the time you're ready to go, you get your map done, you want to get going on the project, so you submit it right away. But as Larry said, it's probably a good time to to look at this as well as a few other things if we've inherited a few things that need to be tweaked. Any other questions from commission members, or do we have a motion?
Well, do we actually need a motion?
I guess not. Do we, Aaron, or?
No, for this
Is
meeting,
this
just
discuss?
acknowledging that it's a good idea and that we should have a public hearing at the next meeting.
Good idea.
Well, at least Don thinks so. I think we have. I think you have what you need, Aaron, to move forward. And thanks, Fred, for calling me in. Item 12 then is to discuss and consider a moving date for the July Plan Commission from July 8th to July 15th.
Yeah, so we kind of talked about this with the public hearing for the comp plan. The notice for that meeting has to be published 30 days prior to the public hearing. The July meeting is on July 8th, which would not give us time to do that. If we push it back to the 15th, we would be able to accommodate that notice and have the hearing at that meeting. And the way the calendar works in July, the village board doesn't meet until the 20th, so we're not really holding anything up by making this shift for 1 week.
Anybody have any issue with that? They're going to be out of town or concerned?
It sounds good. I mean, is there any other village meetings that this would sit on top of? I mean, we might be back to some in-person meetings, right? And so do we have a space issue? I think it's fine, other than that.
The
Lisa's-
calendar is free.
Perfect.
Yep.
I wish I had something else to go to just because I'm not going anywhere this summer. So
Yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of people are in that boat. Stay vacation. Any questions or concerns about that? Otherwise, you'll need a motion then to make that change in meeting date.
I'll move that we move the July Plan Commission meeting from July 8th, 2020 to July 15th, 2020.
Is
I'll
there a
second.
All right, second from Melissa. Any further discussion then? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We'll vacation together. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 13 is future agenda items. Aaron, you want to run down the list?
So we'll have the comp plan public hearing. We will have the public hearing for the changing the deadline for the certified survey map and any other tweaks we come up with related to deadlines in the subdivision ordinance. Larry and I are going to keep working on the conditional use permit ordinance changes. We may have the next level of that to look at next time. Moving out could potentially have something ready for that meeting. Those are the ones that I know about at this point.
Matt, anything else that you can think of? Those.
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. Thanks, Aaron. Anything from the commission members that you can think of? All right. Then the final straw here is the item 14, which is adjournment. Is there a motion?
To adjourn.
Motion from Fred. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alex. Non-debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.